aliens who obtained divorce decree abroad may be recognized in the Philippines provided that they are valid according, or the divorce decree is valid according to their national law. Welcome to the Law Key podcast, where you can listen and review case digests and get practical tips on how to survive law school in the Philippines. Studying law can be very challenging, especially for working students, but with the right tools, the right habits, and the right support group, we can surely survive it. This is Kim, your host, and I hope you enjoy and learn something from this episode. Here we go. Hi! So, for today's episode, we will be discussing about the case of Dorn versus Romillo with GR number L-68470, decided on October 8, 1985. So, this is actually a case given to us under our Persons and Family Relations. So, let's start. So, the facts of this case are: petitioner, which is Alice Reyes Van Dorn, is actually a citizen of the Philippines, while Richard Upton, the private respondent, is a citizen of the United States. So the two were married in Hong Kong in 1972, which after that they established their residence in the Philippines and begot two children. On 1982, the parties were divorced in Nevada, United States, which then led to petitioner remarriage, also in Nevada, this time to Theodore Van Dorn. Now, on June 8, 1983, Richard Upton, the private respondent, actually filed a suit against petitioner. It's a civil case regarding the petitioner's business in Ermita. He contended that the said business is actually a conjugal property of the parties, and he was asking that petitioner be ordered to render an accounting of that business and that private respondent be declared with the right to manage the conjugal property. Petitioner here actually moved to dismiss the case on the ground that the cause of action is barred by previous judgment in the divorce proceedings before the Nevada court, wherein respondent had acknowledged that he and the petitioner had no community property as of June 11, 1982. Now, this petition to dismiss was actually denied by the lower court on the ground that the property involved is located in the Philippines, so that the divorce decree has no bearing in this case. So the denial is now the subject of this certiorari proceeding. Now, the issue of this case is that whether or not the divorce decree of the parties obtained in Nevada, United States, is valid in the Philippines according to Article 15 of the Civil Code, thus giving petitioner respondent no right to file a civil case. But before we tackle the issue or the ruling of the case related to the issue, let's just try to tackle this one. Generally, according to the Supreme Court, the denial of a motion to dismiss in a civil case is interlocutory and it's not subject to appeal. Now, remember, in the facts of this case, petitioner actually moved to dismiss the case, but it was denied. Thus, generally, it should have been interlocutory and is not subject to appeal. However, according to the Supreme Court, when there is actually a grave abuse of discretion, or the lower court acted capriciously and whimsically, then the Supreme Court has the duty to correct in a certiorari proceeding, to exercise its supervisory authority and to correct the error committed, which in this case is equivalent to lack of jurisdiction. So this is actually the reason why the Supreme Court gave this petition an exception. So let's move on to the ruling of the Supreme Court according to about the issue of the case. So remember that the petitioner contended that, hey, private respondent is stopped from laying claim on the alleged conjugal property because he already made it clear in the divorce proceeding that we had no community property. She also contended that the galleon shop, which is the property in question, was not established through conjugal funds, and Private respondent, on the other hand, contended that the divorce decree issued by the Nevada court cannot prevail over the prohibitive law of the Philippines and its declared national policy, that the facts and declaration of a foreign court cannot, especially if the same is contrary to public policy, divest Philippine courts of jurisdiction to entertain matters within its jurisdiction. So the Supreme Court said that for the resolution of this case, it's not necessary to determine whether the property relations between petitioner and private respondent after their marriage were upon absolute or relative community property. The pivotal fact in this case is the Nevada divorce of the parties. So the Nevada District Court, which declared the divorce, had obtained jurisdiction over petitioner who appeared in person before the court during the trial case. It also obtained jurisdiction over private respondent who, giving his address as number 381 Bush Street, San Francisco, California, authorized his attorneys to agree to the divorce on the ground of incompatibility in the understanding that they were neither community property nor community obligations. Now, the Supreme Court said that there can be no question as to the validity of that Nevada divorce in any states of the United States. The decree is binding on private respondent as an American citizen. The issue here is whether the said divorce is actually binding in the Philippines, considering the law, considering the provisions of Article 15 of the Civil Code, which states that laws relating to family rights and duties or to the status, condition, and legal capacity of persons are binding upon citizens of the Philippines even though living abroad. Now, the Supreme Court said that it is true that owing to the nationality principle embodied in Article 15 of the Civil Code, only Philippine nationals are covered by the policy against absolute divorces, the same being considered contrary to our concept of public police and morality. However, aliens may obtain divorces abroad which may be recognized in the Philippines provided that they are valid according to their national law. In this case, the divorce released private respondent from the marriage from the standards of American law under which divorce dissolves the marriage. So, thus, pursuant to his national law, the Supreme Court said that private respondent is no longer the husband of the petitioner. He would have no standing to sue in this case below, as petitioner's husband entitled to exercise control over conjugal assets, as he is bound by the decision of his own country's court, which validly exercised jurisdiction over him and whose decision he does not repudiate. He is stopped by his own representation before said court from asserting his right over the alleged conjugal property. So again to reiterate, although Article 15 covers the Philippine nationals against absolute divorces, aliens who obtained divorce decree abroad may be recognized in the Philippines provided that they are valid according, or the divorce decree is valid according to their national law. Now, in this case, the Nevada divorce decree actually released private respondent from the marriage, and thus he is pursuant to this decree, private respondent is no longer the husband of petitioner, thus giving him no right to sue the petitioner in this case. To maintain the Supreme Court also reiterated to maintain as private respondent thus that under our laws, petitioner has to be considered still married to private respondent and still subject to a wife's obligation under Article 109 of the Civil Code cannot be just. Petitioner should not be obliged to live together with, observe respect and fidelity, and render support to private respondent, and the latter should not continue to be one of her heirs with possible rights to conjugal property. She should not be discriminated against her own country if the ends of justice are to be served. So wherefore, the Supreme Court decided that the petition is granted, and respondent judge Romillo is hereby ordered to dismiss the said complaint. So again, Van Dorn versus Romillo teaches us that although Philippines, according to Article 15 of the Civil Code, only Philippine nationals are covered by the policy against absolute divorce. However, aliens who obtained divorce abroad may still be recognized in the Philippines, provided that they are valid according to their national law. So that's all for Van Dorn versus Romillo. That's it for today's episode, guys. By the way, if you want to get a copy of the full text of the case, highlighting the important details I mentioned earlier, you may want to check this podcast description for the link. Thank you for listening, and talk to you next time. Bye!